So I'm going to kick off the session by introducing myself. My name is Laurissa Tokarchuk, and I am a senior lecturer at Queen Mary, University of London. Kind of a little bit spread, not specialized in specifically XR, but I do a lot of XR related things. But it's not about me that you're here today. You're here today to listen to some very interesting looking papers by three of our authors, or three different groups of authors. The first paper will be presented by Georgia, and I apologize, Georgia, if I get this wrong. Is it Iatraki? She can correct it if not. They're presenting their work that looks at developing quality indicators, expanding quality indicators for intervention design. And so I'll let her introduce more about what it is that she's presenting today.
Thank you. My name, as you said, is Georgia Iatraki, and I am a PhD candidate supervised by Professor Mikropoulos. So this work presents the introduction of a new quality indicator, namely the technology indicator, in special education empirical studies. A foundational concept in educational research is the design and methodology applied to empirical studies that ensure rigor. Single subject design is one prominent design used in special education, which supports effective instructional practices by using a small number of participants, systematic observation and measurement, as well as data analysis. The aim of this design is to assess causal relations between the variables that measure performance over time, and its main advantage is the experimental assessment of the effectiveness of a one-to-one intervention that focuses on each student. What about previous work? A group of experts developed specific standards to categorize the complexity of conducting research in special education. These 7 quality indicators provide a framework to develop and assess an intervention in special education. As we can see, a detailed and comprehensive description of participants and settings, dependent and independent variables, baseline phase, experimental control, internal validity, external validity, and social validity. All these are the 7 suggested quality indicators that this research team recommended for professionals and practitioners to design interventions and empirical studies with high quality. Moreover, current reviews seek to include high-quality studies that account for the types of disability settings, different designs, and the context of professionals or non-professionals involved. Digital technology strengthens a high-quality study too. Especially, it helps all students enhance understanding in science and gain literacy. More recently, augmented reality provides learning environments that promise further access to advanced opportunities in science teaching. Nevertheless, there seems to exist a gap in documenting the role of technology and the appropriate use of its affordances in teaching interventions. The purpose of this work is to provide a basic understanding of applied guidelines which improved evidence-based teaching practices in science by adding the quality indicator of digital technology and its affordances. The research questions are as follows. How can we conduct an empirical study of an AR inquiry-based intervention that measures the recommended 7 quality indicators? And how do we define the AR quality indicator of technology? To answer these questions, we search the subject area of the structure of matter. So we present the 7 quality indicators and our suggestion in line with an empirical study we conducted. The first quality indicator includes the detailed description of the participants, setting, and selection process. According to our augmented reality-based single subject design, the inclusion criteria of the participants were as follows. 3 students with mild intellectual disabilities. They had no physical disability. They had adequate visual and auditory discrimination skills, verbal responding. Also, they demonstrated basic reading and writing skills, but they struggled in comprehension. In addition, we consider students' characteristics such as barriers in concentration, memory deficits, problem-solving difficulties that could be listed in detail when designing an intervention. Specific information regarding the setting were provided too. Our study was conducted in 2 different classrooms in participant schools where students received one-to-one instruction based on specific teaching practices. The second quality indicator is operational precision as well as quantification to generate valid measurements and ensure their replication over time. The study measured the number of correct responses on the physics probe as well as the inquiry skills of students. The 3 students followed verbal guidelines, completed the activity of inquiry, and answered 7 application questions. The third indicator concerns the independent variable. The main instruction included the phases of a structured inquiry based on adaptations, task analysis, prompting, and time delay. These are specific techniques for special education to facilitate students' learning. As we can see, the students with intellectual disability wore AR glasses and observed the water molecules in a glass beaker per state, the 3 phases of water. They could see the glass beaker in its microscopic view, and with AR glasses, they could see the molecules of water per state. The fourth quality indicator concerns the baseline phase, which consisted of 13 sessions delivered in 5 sets. All sets used a digital learning object to visualize the water molecules per state. Here we can see the 2-dimensioned dynamic application, the DLO, where students could observe simultaneously the phases of water microscopically and microscopically. To continue, the results document a pattern that demonstrates experimental control. So we designed the baseline phase to provide 13 demonstrations of experimental effects at 13 different points in time to increase confidence. And the external validity is established through experimental effects replicated across participants, settings, and materials. Some details: the activity lasted 10 minutes, where each student could see a real glass of beaker through the augmented reality glasses. The beaker contained virtual molecules moving in a different way per state. So the participant could move freely in their classroom and observe the real world with augmented with the virtual molecules. Social importance relates to the dependent variable and the magnitude of change in the specific variable that results from the intervention. To collect feedback on students' experience, a questionnaire based on the LOSS tool was administered with learning, quality, engagement, and presence as key factors. Some students' comments: I liked everything, but I liked most when the molecules were moving everywhere. It was amazing. I liked that I could see the molecules so closely. Moreover, the questions were verbally adapted to facilitate students' understanding and reduce their barriers. Regarding technology, what is our suggestion? Our empirical study used the AR technological affordances, which emerged from the macroscopic consideration of the real world, augmented by the microscopic consideration of the digital world. Via the see-through AR glasses, each student had a first-person point of view and lived relevant experience of the real world, augmented with the virtual water molecules in 3 states. The students could immerse themselves into the microcosm and feel present among the water molecules. Also, they tried to touch the molecules or remove the cap of the beaker. The rest affordances of size in space and time, transduction, and reification were equally applied through the visualization of the molecules. These elements contribute to minimizing discrimination difficulties regarding the shape, size, and color of the virtual molecules, as researchers in spatial education and especially in the field of intellectual disability have noticed and recorded. In addition, the students could improve their autonomy and navigation skills using the AR device. Well, the results of the augmented reality intervention are presented in line with the quality indicators of the single subject design, the 7 quality indicators, and our suggestion. And the learning outcomes were analyzed visually and graphed. We see that the 3 students had low data in baseline phase and also variability. But we noticed that an immediacy of effect, and the 3 students showed an important increase in correct responses after the intervention was introduced. In addition, they enhanced their motivation and understanding of abstract physics concepts. To sum up, we suggest this extended set of quality indicators to researchers and professionals, also to practitioners, teachers in special education, when designing evidence-based experiments for students with intellectual disabilities, addressing their individualized needs and progress in science. So all this work, we believe that contributes to students' inclusion in science, understanding, and science literacy. Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Georgia. I have several questions, but before I ask any questions, I would like to hand over to the audience. If they have any questions, please feel free to either unmute your mic or to type something in the chat. See if anybody's hand is up. So I'll kick off with a question, and we'll see if somebody follows after that. But Georgia, I wondered if you had any thoughts as to what you thought the specific benefits in this case of using AR over VR were.
Regarding the field of special education and especially students with intellectual disability, considering their difficulties, we think that AR could help and contribute more about their situation, because they could immerse in a real environment, in a real educational environment, so they could feel more comfortable and follow the steps in an educational program.
Yeah, that actually seems very reasonable. So if you kind of think of the challenges that students might have, they would perhaps feel very uncomfortable in a virtual reality world. So in terms of kind of your outcomes, how I know that it's kind of an old thing, but how much novelty do you think might have come to play in your results in terms of the learning benefits that the students had?
We usually apply this design, single subject research design, that research has indicated that it is effective and efficient for this situation. So with this visual analysis, we could have many details in our results and assess each student in line with him, with itself. For example, each improvement has to do with his previous state, not with the whole team, for example. This is for special education, this is the important thing, to assess each student with his previous knowledge and his previous background, and see the improvement regarding his outcomes.
Okay.
May I jump in?
Yes, of course, Tassos.
Okay, thank you. As far as it regards the first question, so first of all, this is a part of Georgia's PhD. So before this, let's say, main empirical study, Georgia conducted a series of pilot studies with special samples, subjects like specialists on special education, specialists on science education, and students with intellectual disabilities. And in those pilot studies, Georgia compared virtual and augmented reality systems. So this proposal, let's say, with augmented reality, and especially by using these glasses and not smartphones, came as a result of literature review, of course, and her pilot studies. And as far as concerns the second question, which is really very, very important, I think that the novelty has to do with the proposal of this new eighth, let's say, item among the 7 items of quality indicators proposed by this special committee some years ago. A review we've conducted shows that many people, in special education, conducting empirical studies, maybe are a little bit far from learning technologies, and they do not use efficiently the affordances of each technology they use. So we now actually use augmented reality, and we try to check if technological and learning affordances of augmented reality could add value to empirical studies in special education. And I think that this is the novelty of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Tassos. So let's thank again Georgia and for her great session.
Thank you.
So we will move on now to our second presenter, which is David Ferns, who will be talking about the design of serious games for history education, which I'm looking forward to. First of all, I love serious games, and second of all, I would love to see a serious game that would engage my son in learning about history. So I'm looking forward to your presentation. And I just want to take this opportunity, though, to remind everyone, because I think I forgot during the introduction, that these sessions are being recorded, just so everyone knows. David, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and your work.
Thank you. As you already said, my name is David Ferns. I'm currently a PhD student at the University in Frankfurt in Germany. and I'm presenting a paper about developing an immersive serious game for history education. First, to give a bit of background in which context this game was developed. This predates actually my PhD studies. It was done when I was still a master's student at the University of Würzburg, and mostly developed by one person, myself, for our master's thesis. It was additionally supported by, of course, academic advisors and some history teachers and staff from an open-air museum. And the target audience for this application is a 7th grade history class for German schools. So don't be confused if on the screenshots you're going to see a lot of German text. That's because it was developed for German schools, but I'm going to explain what it says if it's important so everyone can understand. So what was the idea behind this application? Well, first of all, history education is something that often is perceived by a lot of students as kind of boring. It's just old stuff, usually taught by just like reading old texts. And we thought, how can we make this more interesting? And one idea was to use games or serious games in this case, because gaming is something that's for most students more interesting than standard education, let's say. And another problem of history education is, since you're teaching about something that's already happened in the past, it's hard to directly experience this content because it's not around anymore. And what can help with this is virtual reality, because you can immerse yourself in the world of the past. So our idea was to develop an immersive serious game for this use case. So quick overview of related work. There's already a few applications using virtual reality or using serious games technology for history education. But most of the VR applications are often just simple reconstructions of historic buildings that you can explore, but don't have a high level of interactivity. You can't do much in them. And on the other hand, there's lots of serious games, but not many of them use additional immersive technology. And our idea was to combine these two approaches to get the maximum value for history education. So the basic concept of our game is you're going to experience the life or a day in the life of a medieval miller's apprentice. And the application was based on actual historical buildings from an open-air museum in Germany. And the application was designed in cooperation with history teachers to be as effective for history lessons as possible. And we developed this in multiple steps. The first version was a very simple start, mostly developed in cooperation with the museum, and was simply a reconstruction of a medieval mill. They already wanted to do a virtual version of this mill, and it was ideal for our use case. So we took some photos, took measurements, and tried to reconstruct this building in virtual reality. Added a simple interaction system so you can do some things in the mill. And we developed two versions, one usable in VR with a head-mounted display and one on a desktop PC. Then we did a first evaluation to just get a bit of feedback for further development. And we also compared usability of both versions to see if there are differences between them and if we can improve this. The results were there were no significant differences, but the usability we found could still be improved. We also got some feedback that some of the interactions, especially in the VR version, were not quite clear. And the reason why you perform the tasks you do in this environment were not clear to the users. So we took this feedback and expanded the application. We added a tutorial to explain the interaction, so it's more clear how you interact with the environment. And we added a narrative with a short storyline to give more context to why you're doing things in this environment. And we also expanded the application to not only include the mill, but also additional scenes and additional characters and interactions. The final application covered 5 topics that were part of the curriculum for 7th grade history education in Germany. And it was developed in cooperation with history teachers and history teacher students. And the topics covered were life in general in medieval towns, the work of a medieval miller, religion in the Middle Ages, the invention of the printing press at the end of the Middle Ages, and the plague and how people tried to cure it. And I hope this video works. Yes. And we put this all into a short narrative. The game starts with you waking up or you sleeping and hearing the call of a rooster. And then you can decide to either wake up or keep sleeping, depending on your choices. Your boss, the miller, will react differently to you and then give you some work. You do some work in the mill, as you can currently see. You have some grains that a farmer brought, put them into the mill mechanism, start the mill. In this case, it's a water mill, which you start by pulling a lever, and then the water runs and mills the grain into flour. Collect this, and yeah, I'm just gonna let it run in the background a bit. Collect this, and then the miller sends you with a little bag of flour to the market to trade this flour for some bread with a baker. And there you meet some other characters like a priest who's going to talk to you about religion and the plague and the inventing of the printing press and several developments during that time. And afterwards, you return back to the mill and go back to sleep. So you end where you started this application. So I'm just gonna let the video play up a little bit so you can see all of the parts. Don't worry, it's not the full application. I cut parts out because it's like 10 to 15 minutes for a full playthrough, and that's a bit long for this presentation. Here you can see the market where you go and buy some bread and talk with the miller, the baker. And while you wait, you can talk to other people. And then other people talk to you, and in the end, you go back. So now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail how we implemented this. The whole game was developed in the Unity game engine. Most of the models were created specifically for this application in Blender, based on measurements of the actual buildings. And there were some of the models which were more complicated were used from bought from an asset store, like the characters, which I'm going to go into more detail later. And we developed two different versions, one using Steam VR and a VR headset with immersive virtual reality, and a desktop PC version, which you can just use with keyboard and mouse, which will be relevant later for a study we conducted with this. We had several characters. We used an asset pack we bought to create those characters. And we found out it's actually quite difficult to find professional characters for medieval applications because there are lots of asset packs for characters for the Middle Ages, but most of them are not really historically accurate and more used for fantasy video games. And so it was kind of difficult to find something that was usable, but still close to accurate. The characters we used in the end were not fully, I think, historically accurate, but close enough for our application. We tried to use not too photorealistic characters because the environment we modeled ourselves was also not fully photorealistic. So we tried to fit them into this environment, that it was a coherent graphical design. And for all the characters you can talk to, we recorded voiceover. This voice was recorded by some colleagues of ours, and we decided for the texts not to use authentic medieval Franconian language because it would be hard to understand for students what is being said, and we thought it was more important that the students can clearly understand what the people are saying than to be fully realistic in the choice of words and dialects used. And all the voiceovers were also presented as subtitles, but we used like these small speech bubbles over the heads of people showing the text they're currently saying. So even if you can't hear it real good, you can still read what is being said. And these speech bubbles are also visible through walls. So even if you're in another room, you can still see what is being talked about. We have several game mechanics, interaction mechanics. There's several objects in the environment that you can pick up, carry around. You have a small pouch on your hip that you can store objects in and take out later. And there's objects you can interact with, like this lever, as I said, you can pull, and then the flow of water starts in the mill. And you have some choices in dialogues what to say or what to do. These choices have just small variations to the dialogue that happens, because if we have a big branching storyline that would, on one hand, be difficult to implement, would take a lot of time. On the other hand, there would be a possibility that some people missed certain information that they should learn in this game. So the dialogue only does small branches, which still lead to the same information in the end. So no one can miss any important information. So with this application, we performed 2 more evaluations. The first evaluation was real short, and we just tested if the prerequisites were given for the final evaluation. That means, is the usability comparable between the VR and the desktop version? Is there any simulator sickness? Because if there's simulator sickness, it would probably be detrimental to learning. And if the task load, especially mental task load, is comparable between the both versions. And we found out, yes, that all prerequisites are given. Everything is comparable between those 2 versions. And so we did our final evaluation. And there we looked at 2 to 3 things. We compared before and after playing the game, how much people knew about the things, history knowledge in the application, and how their interest in the topic of history was in general. And then we compared between the both versions, what they knew, how the interest in history was, and how interesting they found the application. And we did an additional short test 2 weeks after playing the game to test if people still remembered the things from the game they learned. And yeah, we measured the history knowledge with a short test we did ourselves. There were 10 questions in total, 2 per topic covered in the application. And one of the questions was asked before and one after the application, after the game was played, for each topic, so that people don't know what they're being asked afterwards and can focus on this and just learn naturally. And the situation topic interest was measured with a short questionnaire. And additionally, we added some open questions for more feedback at the end. Yeah, we tested 38 university students, and the procedure just did a short test. They played a short tutorial, then played the game, did the tests at the end, and then after 2 weeks, they get an email with a short online test. I'm going to skip over the hypothesis. It's basically, we think that interest is higher in VR than in desktop, and after playing the game than before, and the people learn more in the VR condition. So the results were people learned something while playing the game. So people knew more after playing the game than before, which was to be expected if we did a good job. And still, after 2 weeks, they still knew more than before playing the game. But sadly, there were no differences between the VR and the desktop condition. So they learned the same thing in both conditions. And there were some questions where the scores of the participants were low, and there were mainly questions which were not clearly presented, and you had to make some inferences about the learning content. Topic interest was also higher after playing the game, but also no differences between conditions. And also the situation interest had no difference between conditions. So in general, our application was successful in conveying the learning content, increasing interest in history, but it doesn't seem to make a difference in the things we investigated, whether using VR or desktop, which actually might be a good thing, because VR headsets are still expensive and not easily available for everyone. So it's good that you can also use a simple desktop application without losing any of the benefits. And yeah, we get some further feedback, which I'm going to skip over because my time is nearly over. And yeah, there's some future work that we might do. That's like some improvements on the presentation of the game, add some more content, and do a study with the actual target audience, which is 7th grade students. So that's it, basically. I think my 15 minutes are done. if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Thank you very much, David. So do we have any questions from the audience? Tassos.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It was a really nice work. I apologize if I missed something, but as far as I could see from your transparencies, you followed the LMGM model to design your game, yes? Learning mechanics, game mechanics.
Yes, more or less.
Okay, so I would like to give us some hints on the learning mechanics side of the game, or the challenges the player faces during the playing.
Yeah, well, the challenges is mostly you have to, is the task you perform in the middle, like you have to follow the instructions and do the steps of the thing. I have to agree that the second part where you visit the market has less mechanics from the player and is more interacting, talking with people. That's also some of the feedback we got, that people wanted more interactive elements in the second part. And that's one of the things that we'd like to add if we gonna continue on this project, would be to add more game mechanics to the market part of the application, because currently it's more that people are talking to you and you get information from what they say to you, and not that you really have this knowledge encoded in the game mechanics itself. And that's a point where I also think we could make some improvements to the game.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Nice work.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I have a question. Hi, David, that was very interesting. I was just wondering, from the feedback that you collected, do you think there could be something that is developed in the VR that might make it a bit more effective when compared to the desktop version? Maybe some elements or things that perhaps even the users mentioned themselves.
I think for this application and the information we try to convey in this application, I think the benefits of VR are not that much, because most of the things we try to convey as mostly still facts that you have to repeat. I think where VR would be more effective is if we focused more, and that people can try to really experience the life and try to understand how people feel and insert themselves into the role of the people. But I think the problem why VR was not more effective is because for this kind of knowledge, it doesn't make that much difference how you experience this, because it's mostly focused on facts. And if you have more like more like emotional things, like to try to understand how the people felt, how the people acted in these times, it would be more effective to use VR. So I think it depends on the learning content you have, whether VR can be more effective or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fair enough. I think we're running out of time, but one other thing that you might look into for VR, for history, is embodied actions. So really looking at the design of the interaction portion of it. Certainly some of the work that we've looked at has shown some improvement in learning outcomes as a result of embodiment. So thank you again, David. I had a whole list of questions, but this time we had loads. So I will maybe grab you at a break, maybe wandering around the virtual campus. So we are now going to move to our third and final presenter, which is Sharon Pisani. And she is coming same area of the world as me, from the UK, but she's in Wales, and she's going to be presenting a paper on looking at how to promote Gaelic language. if my understanding of the abstract is correct, and looking at the design of that for increasing the cultural awareness of it. So I'll hand over to Sharon to introduce herself and her paper.
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm a PhD student at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, and I'm presenting a paper about digitizing the cultural landscape of North Uist. So firstly, what are cultural landscapes? They are defined by UNESCO as combined works of nature and humankind, which express a long and intimate relationship between people and their natural environment. So it is the natural environments which over time have changed through the interaction with people. And why should they be preserved? They are firstly being lost due to climate change, solar exposure. So this is a common problem within all heritage, especially outdoor spaces. But when looking at cultural landscapes, you're also seeing that the landscape itself is changing and is being lost. Cultural landscapes are more than just the landscapes. They incorporate all that humanity creates or interacts with in the landscape. So digital preservation of cultural landscape can be holistic, can bring this approach and preserve tangible and intangible heritage in the landscape. It's possible to create a copy of the whole landscape instead of different silos for each of its heritage. So you don't just look at the place or the objects in the heritage, but you look at all of them together. And this is what we are exploring in this paper. So this paper takes us to North Uist. It's an island in the Outer Hebrides. It has a very close relationship with the land and the sea, both of which are under pressure from climate change. As a landscape, it's mostly flat with lots of salt water and freshwater lakes, and it has unique sand dunes and meher on the land. Everything is being very affected by climate change, and it's really at the point of being lost due to high-level sea rises as well. North Uist is also one of the closest concentrations of Gaelic speakers. It is one of the few places amongst the Highlands, mostly in Scotland, where people still speak Gaelic socially, but this is also in decline. So the decline of Gaelic and the decline of the landscape itself makes this North Uist as a good candidate to try and capture the entirety of the landscape. The research was part of a project called iLRN, which means Attention to Wellbeing in Scots Gaelic. It focuses on co-creation between experts, researchers, and community members, and it's an ongoing project. Community co-creation is really good when developing digital heritage resources together to enhance engagement. The aims of the project were to learn, in fact, how well-being activities can be improved through heritage, and how to discover how research into the community use of Gaelic language can enrich Gaelic activities, and explore how virtual reality can contribute to local sense of place, value, identity, and well-being. So it's all connected between well-being, Gaelic, and the heritage, and how all of these interconnect together. Obviously, then capturing the whole cultural landscape was a very good thing to do in this project. The aims of our research in particular were to promote digital engagement with heritage to strengthen the vernacular community and positively impact well-being. In the process, this makes it easier for community members to access digital materials related to their heritage. The second aim was to capture, represent, and preserve the cultural landscape, as described before. This meant that we wanted to capture both the tangible and intangible heritage, so places, objects, stories, music, language, etc. And the third and final aim was to integrate digital representations in the Gaelic medium to help increase Gaelic content, especially in mixed reality. So some background about heritage spaces and their connection to community well-being. Firstly, the research has shown that there are health advantages from taking part in locally based heritage conservation. People are active, they go to archaeology sites, they interact with other people, there's both a social and a physical benefit to this. They also get a sense of empowerment when community has control over the heritage they are preserving. So this allows co-creation and co-participation activities to be very fruitful. Digital tools make this easier, make the co-production much easier and more inclusive for people in the community to feel comfortable about contributing valuable insights and working together. In this way, the community feels that they are doing with, then being done to. Sometimes people feel that they don't have a say in what is preserved about their heritage or how it is interpreted. So digital tools can help reduce this barrier. Some background on the Gaelic crisis itself. As I said, Gaelic is being lost. A recent social linguistic survey across the Highlands saw that the social use and transmission of Gaelic is at the point of collapse. There is even decline in teenage use, and the social settings are not fully Gaelic anymore. Before, if you went to the Highlands, you only heard Gaelic. Now English is taking over, so people have less of a chance to interact in Gaelic together. One way of reviving this is to ensure that Gaelic exists in the digital medium, but our research shows that very little exists in mixed reality or other new digital technologies. One example that we found was Owner, which means alone in Gaelic, and it's a VR game that has won the Young BAFTA Students Award. It is probably, from what we have seen, the only VR game that is available in Scots Gaelic. The University of Edinburgh has also done some work with speech recognition for digital assistants. So this helps bring Gaelic to mobile phones and like Google Speech and things like that. And there's also Uist Narrated, which is an AR app that highlights some important parts, some important sites in Uist. But these are practically all that we could find that incorporates Gaelic in digital media. There's also very little research about mixed reality in Gaelic education settings. Our work is based on previous work that we've done with North Uist, for instance, St. Kilda, which is an island that has been abandoned and it's very close to North Uist. We've created a reconstruction that shows the abandoned island, how people left it in the early 20th century, I believe. People don't still live there, and it's very hard to get to this island. So this made this place more known on the global scale. There's also a project in North Uist called Island Voices, which records in Gaelic community issues and interesting topics, and also includes other languages. So the focus of this project is more on collecting vernacular languages. The outputs for this project, we wanted to take a holistic approach to the digitization of cultural landscape, so recording places, stories, objects. We created 3 different outputs: virtual walks, a 3D digitization archive, and the performance archive. We will discuss this later. So why did we want this work to be immersive? Mixed reality exhibits can bring together physical and virtual representations of heritage, and it enriches both virtual and the historical representation. Our VR tour showed the physical 360 location of certain sites around North Uist, and it also showed a virtually reconstructed environment to show how it looked like back when it was still used. There was a possibility to explore the location in both the real life and the historical version. So this developed a sense of presence with their heritage. Reconstructions visualized archaeology and connected the participants with their social histories. But we wanted the immersivity to be possible anywhere. So we could try this VR app through the VR headsets, but also made it available online through iOS and Android devices, and as a local system with a touchscreen, which enables use in locations without internet, which sometimes in the Highlands and the islands is quite common. This was crucial as VR technologies are also not heavily present. As David said before me, they're still relatively expensive. And in this community, not many people have VR headset. So unless they go to the museum where the VR headset is located, they wouldn't have been able to experience the virtual walks. So we wanted people to learn about heritage, but more importantly, we wanted them to explore the locations in both Gaelic and English. The Gaelic has a voiceover. So if we look at the map here, this is the menu system for one of the virtual walks. The hotspots include 360 photos of the location. And then people can also listen to the Gaelic information as a voiceover to the 360 photos. But we also included a video library, so students had performed the story of the Lord in this place called Dunansticker, and this was included as well. Then there are the parts with the reconstructions. So we have a reconstruction video which walks the users through the historically reconstructed place. And then we had the virtual historical walk, which was essentially the same hotspots that you see on the map, but taken inside the virtual environment. So because the focus was not just on the immersive virtual environment, the participants could situate their heritage and learn about it through experiencing it in all its different aspects, such as through the music, performances, and objects. So the methodology to our work was firstly based on community-based heritage. The focus here was to allow people to create material and incorporate the material that people create in the digital work, in our work. Then the second step was to implement these digital tools that capture the Gaelic language and culture. These are the virtual walks and the different archives that we created. These can be used to foster innovative Gaelic heritage learning as well, because everything was available in both Gaelic and English. Finally, the tools were evaluated in a digital phase. This was an open day where some of the community-based heritage and the digital tools were exhibited. This included one of the virtual walks, and we collected more material as well to create more. So the virtual walks, this is the main menu for the virtual reality app. The virtual walks are recording the heritage place and the language. They were based on actual well-being walks that took people to archaeology sites where people interacted, and we took photos of the locations. And then the 360 real-life photos were combined with the virtual reconstructions and the Gaelic interpretation, as explained previously. These are some screenshots from the VR application. So on the top, you can see Dunansticker, as it looks like now, and below you can see that there was this dun, it's like a tower that was built upon this land. The other output was 3D digitalization. So we created a digital archive of objects and stories in Gaelic and in English. These were scanned on location during the digital phase using the Arctic Spider laser scanner. People brought their own objects, so a lot of the objects that people had at homes. And the scanner was chosen because it facilitated the quick scanning of objects with real-time editing. So the community member who brought the object could be present during the entire process. We also recorded stories of the people themselves talking about the objects. So we created an interactive digital North Uist community museum built by the community with objects and proper interpretation for those objects. The gallery has over 15 objects and 20 stories. The third output was the performance archive. We recorded students as part of the page performing different traditional instruments, such as the accordion and the cantor, which you can see over there, which is something like a flute, but you don't blow into it. I had never seen it before. This created an archive of music and song that is traditional to the Gaelic landscape. And it also allowed youths to partake in the heritage preservation. So we evaluated the virtual environment at the digital phase. We had a survey where visitors left their feedback. The questions were categorized into societal impact, value for promotion and preservation of heritage, suitability of the digital tools, and the usability. There was a strong response across all of the categories, which reflect our observation on the day, with people engaging well, especially with the virtual tour element in the Gaelic commentary. This provided an opportunity for some of the people to hear Gaelic being used outside their normal home environment, so people really enjoyed that. The positive responses suggest that the heritage was communicated well using the method. The lowest responses still achieved over an 80% positive rate. These lower questions were questions regarding the information presented in the topic, which was perhaps too broad, as it just kind of gave an overview and a brief history of each of the archaeological site. It might have been information that people have already known. So our recommendation is that whilst we took an explorative approach to the immersive experience, where people could just select what they wanted to see from the VR app, another approach would be to guide the user on an informative journey, which focuses on certain elements of the landscape in order to provide the information. This is especially beneficial for Gaelic learning by including certain lexicon or words or phrases that can be highlighted in the experience. This gives an opportunity to learn new things in the environment and connect the history to the Gaelic words as well. Our main finding was that when the community has a role in creating digital heritage, it increases access to their heritage and strengthens their sense of empowerment. This contributes to their overall sense of well-being. And additionally, combining the digitization techniques can aid in the production and archiving of digital content of all the facets of cultural landscape. So because we approach this with 3D scanning, with video recording, audio recording, creating virtual environments, we covered all of the aspects of a cultural landscape. Our next step is a wider community survey to gather more data on a larger scale. This has already been done, and the initial results show that there is a demand for more co-produced heritage activities. In fact, the following thing would be more live digitization. We were going to have another digital phase recently, but unfortunately it was canceled due to a death on the island, which I found really shows the community, the strength of the community on this island. And finally, our biggest project is the Gaelic Place Names project. The survey revealed that there is a concern within the community members about the loss of Gaelic place names. So our approach will be extended by creating more virtual walks in Gaelic, but also recording place names in an interactive map, which is co-produced by the community members. For the iLRN community, some future directions include how VR and AR can further develop the availability of Gaelic in the digital medium. We want to investigate how mixed reality applications can be used for Gaelic learning instead of just the preservation of the Gaelic, and also a continued representation and preservation of underrepresented cultural landscape could be another research direction. Finally, to conclude, this paper has shown that elements of immersive learning can be applied to cultural heritage to aid in the well-being of vernacular communities by increasing their sense of social inclusion. The immersive nature of the virtual walks aids in learning about the cultural heritage present in cultural landscapes, increases the well-being, and makes these hard-to-reach locations available for community members who are perhaps not able to visit these locations. That was a bit fast, but I had a lot to cover, so thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It was a great talk. Before I ask any questions, we only have time, I think, for a couple questions. I'll see if there's any questions from the audience. No questions from the audience. So Sharon, I was, first of all, I apologize. I think I was half asleep this morning when I introduced you. So apologies there. But I am really fascinated by the scanning of the objects from St. Kilda's. Were they all from there, or were there kind of a variety of different objects?
They were a variety of different objects. So some of them were from St. Kilda, but a lot of them were from North Uist itself, and they were objects that people had in their own home. A lot of the objects were related to crofters, for instance. Crofting was a type of farming that was very common in the Highlands. So a lot of people have these artifacts that are not really in any museum, but are still important to their heritage.
Fascinating. So do you plan to, do you have any plans to take these objects now and create kind of more immersive experiences?
Yes, so we are looking at creating virtual reality experiences where instead of just having the environment and the location, we also implement some of these objects. So for instance, with a virtual landscape of a crofter's farm, we could actually include the artifacts that people have in their own homes, which have been 3D scanned.
you can imagine all sorts of really interesting game mechanics and kind of affordances offered by those objects. So I'm looking forward to kind of your work beyond this. So best of luck, and thank you again for the great presentation. If we could thank all of the speakers, well, first of all, Sharon, and all of the speakers today. Before I let you release you all back I encourage you to go and check out the poster session that is, I believe, running now. Thank you.